Sounds good to me.
What's my paper sliced
I know.
with a knife?
Sorry.
What are you doing?
Have a defective paper? Do you need another one?
No.
We have plenty.
It's working now.
I told you to do that for your
Are you causing trouble, John?
Yeah, my first day back and I'm in trouble.
Are we back?
As soon as I put
Almost.
the car in.
It says it's offline again. It has the overview right there, though.
So you can see this?
Yeah, I can see you, but you haven't moved in quite a while.
Oh.
He hasn't moved.
No, he's just like...
I'm not being stationary, but I'm not moving around. That's better.
Wave your hands in the air or something. Was that the D song?
See, it was connected 6 minutes ago, and now we're not connected.
So what I should do is have something up there is
I'm actually
you should
connected.
be here.
For some reason, I'm
camera may not
connected to
work.
your house, the kitchen.
Yeah.
The wire? Oh, it's probably still trying to find wireless.
Well, let me disconnect. I'm wired, but I think that's the problem.
Disconnect the wireless.
Yeah.
Yahoo Morris, that's what it was.
Yeah, all it takes is a little breeze and you lose the wireless from the kitchen because it's a long ways away.
Probably because Elena's in there.
She's probably absorbing it all with her phone.
Yeah. She's tampering.
Oh, is she in there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
She's finishing her just checked out letter. I told her that she's not supposed to eat in the church.
Nose.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
not
so
the
she
only
needs some
one.
vitamin C.
But my voice has really improved since Sunday.
Yes, it has because I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, it's streaming, man.
It's streaming. We're back.
Hello, everyone. I missed you.
Well, welcome back. We're going to go to the beginning. Just so you can... Oh no. Here's where you get the information. Download the PDF if you're joining us live. It is much better to be here live because I give you handouts. You're not relying upon Windows or Wi-Fi or camera problems. You're not. It's just real. Besides, you can eat John's oranges.
No viruses.
Okay. 1 Kings. We're only going through 1 through 11 this evening. Jeremiah is the author of Kings according to tradition, written prior to the exile in 586 BC. All right. Am I going the wrong way?
I feel bad now. I really bad. I'll go to Walmart and get a bag first.
Oh no.
Okay, come on. Let's
If
go
we lost the
correct.
live stream right now, I would
Going, going.
I'm going to go home and try and watch this on live stream.
I almost stayed at home.
Okay, time period. David's death, beginning of Ahaziah's reign. Okay, theme. Historical development of the kingdom of God under the Davidic covenant. The welfare of the kingdom depends on the covenant faithfulness of the king and the people. Okay, simple outline. United kingdom under Solomon, and then divided kingdom, and then the kingdom after Assyria takes the northern 10 tribes away in 722. Only Judah is left, and that goes until Babylon takes it away. Okay, key people for tonight is just Solomon. Okay, a little bit of review. The people rejected theocracy. That's the first part of Samuel. They wanted a king to be like the other nations. The kings had an advantage over the judges. Judges usually only had a small area they had an effect on. The kings ruled the whole nation. If you had a good king, the nation could do well. Even if it was only outward show, at least you're moving that direction. If it was a bad king, he would lead them into evil. And it would be oppressive to those who wanted to walk in righteousness. Main difference between Saul and David was repentance and humility. Saul started well, then became proud, and wanted to do things his own ways, even to the point he really was disobeying God and seeking to keep the kingdom and seeking to kill David. But the kingdom was given to David. David, when he was confronted with sin, admitted his sin and put himself in the hands of God. Saul tried to preserve himself. So, good kings.
Glasses. Good kings look
Okay.
like.
Good kings look like godliness and blessings, and evil kings, what you see is sin and curse. Okay, we'll do some of the glasses. It's supposed to be an arrow, but you switch to a different computer and you get new things. Okay. And those are reading
You
glasses
type
too.
in wingdings.
Yeah, reading glasses,
Wingdings.
not glasses. Okay. Interesting.
No.
Okay, 1st and 2nd Kings was one book. And it was just called Kings in the Hebrew. And then when the Septuagint, which is what the LXX stands for, the 70, LXX is 70, so the Septuagint, when that was created, they divided it. And it could be just where the scroll break was or something, we don't know, but they divided the 1st and 2nd Kings. That's why it seems a little arbitrary where it breaks. But it was just one book. 1 Kings, again, the establishment of Solomon, divides are under Rehoboam, and we'll get to that next week. So Solomon's appointed king, and read the 1st chapter. Adonijah, his older brother, seeks to establish himself as king, calls his brothers, and they're going to celebrate. He has Joab there. He's got lots of people to help him, and Bathsheba hears about it. And Nathan hears about it. Actually, Nathan hears about it. Goes to Bathsheba. They go into David and then petition him, because David had promised Bathsheba that her son Solomon would be the one on the throne. And so they come up with a plan and they let him know about it. And David immediately then takes action, and after their intervention, and appoints David as Solomon as king. And they announce it. Adonijah hears about it because he's not that far away from where he's trying to claim himself king, and now he knows he could be in trouble. My brother's now king. I've tried to take it. I could be considered a threat. So Solomon spares Adonijah, but he warns him. Doesn't go to his house. That's part of the issue. We're going to find that Adonijah does still have this idea that somehow he's going to gain the throne. That comes up next. So chapter 2 then deals with solidifying the kingdom. First part of this David's charge to Solomon. Let's go back up there. David tells Solomon he needs to walk with God. That's number one. Second, execute Joab for a variety of reasons. Joab was a murderer. And Joab took place in this time with Adonijah to usurp. Next, be kind to Barzillai, who had been kind to David. And then fourth, execute Shimei. And the way he does it is, you know what needs to be done with these guys. You're going to be wise. Bring down their gray heads to Sheol. So it's find a way, execute them. Now David dies, but he had reigned in 40 years as king, 7 years in Hebron, 33 years in Jerusalem, and then Solomon begins his reign. Now with that, Solomon's enemies then are removed, and it goes in a sequence. First, Adonijah seeks to have his father's concubine. Well, that sets himself up. He's married to one of David's, so he wants to position himself where maybe he still can have a claim on the throne. And so Joab has him executed. Abiathar, who had been high priest, had taken part with that rebellion. So he could have executed him. Instead, he exiles him. Then Joab is executed. And then Shimei is executed, but it's an elaborate plan for that one. Shimei had been promised by David, even though he had cursed David, I'm not going to execute you. Solomon sets him up as, you're safe as long as you stay in Jerusalem. If you leave Jerusalem, you will die. And an incident with some donkeys, and he goes looking for them, and he comes back, and Solomon's just this is what I told you, now it's going to happen. And so Shimei is executed. So this solidifies his kingdom. His enemies have been put put down. Now next is that God comes to Solomon in a dream and tells him he's going to grant him a wish. What would he want now that he's king? And Solomon has this really wonderful prayer, a very humble prayer that he feels inadequate. So what he wants is wisdom. He wants wisdom to lead God's people well. Now, most would want power or wealth or whatever. He doesn't. That's what his concentration on is he wants wisdom to lead God's people. And God grants Solomon's prayer. Plus, he says, I'm also going to grant you wisdom plus riches and honor, things he didn't ask for. And then the chapter goes on and immediately demonstrates Solomon's wisdom with the story of
Two prostitutes.
the two harlots who had children. One laid on a baby and killed it, tries to switch it, well, which is the mother? And this is put in there to demonstrate the kind of wisdom that Solomon has. He's able to cut through all that. And so he does have that. Chapter 4 deals with his administration, all of his officials, who they are. And then it talks about his wealth, his power. And he was quite wealthy. His daily provision, just to give you an idea of how much wealth was coming in, okay? This is what was used daily to feed all the people he was responsible for. 30 bushels of flour, 600 bushels of meal, 30 ox, 100 sheep, plus other animals that they would hunt, deer and things like that. In terms of power, he had 40,000 stalls for horses for chariots, because you have more than one horse per chariot. He had 12,000 horsemen. His wisdom, he was considered to be wiser than everyone that existed then or before. And then he understood just about everything. He wrote 3,000 proverbs, 1,005 songs. He understood botany, zoology, and had worldwide fame for his wisdom. So what God granted him was very quickly seen in reality.
That's amazing how they document all the numbers.
Well, they would have been, you're going to have official records, so they'd be documenting this stuff, and Jeremiah would have had access to it. Okay, the extent, this is the largest extent of the kingdom of Israel is under Solomon. So it's from the river of Egypt and goes to the river, Euphrates, all the way in the northeast there. That's what it was supposed to have been. And he's the closest. There's only a small section that had been promised that he's not in control of, but that's the largest Israel had become. All the way
Is this picture
up to
what it's
Euphrates.
supposed to be, or this is what it was under Solomon?
This is what it was under Solomon. That's how much territory he ended up controlling.
But it should go from the Euphrates all the way to the Mediterranean, correct?
It should, well, it's supposed to cut in over here someplace. I have to go back to the other maps, but it is supposed to be this amount. This is supposed to be Israel. It's supposed to be from the river all the way to the river of Egypt. So it encompasses all of it. Okay, that's what belongs. Now, he also has Moab and Edom. That was not to be part of Israel. They were separate. But he conquers them and has control because remember, they fought against David, so David conquers them. So now they're under his control. But the territory actually given to them would not have included Edom and Moab. Okay, that gives you just kind of a sense. It is a large kingdom. He's a major power. Okay, next it deals with construction of the temple. He makes an alliance with Hiram, king of Tyre. Part of that is because the Sidonians were known for their ability to with timber, and they would go up to Lebanon, and that's where they get the cedar trees and the cypress trees for all their construction. And they didn't have McCullough chainsaws, or any other kind. What's popular now? Still, they didn't have any chainsaws. They had themselves, and so there was a lot of forced laborers. There's 30,000 forced laborers. Those have been slaves. There were 70,000 transporters, because you didn't have big trucks. No Peterbilts, no Macs, no, not even a Ford. 80,000 hewers of stone. 80,000. It took a lot to cut the stones. Well, you got to be thinking about it. They don't have diamond saws. They don't have any of that stuff. So there's ways they could get it to crack and then to smooth it off. That's all done by hand. And it's very tedious. So 80,000 hewers of stone to dress the stones. There was 3,300 people just overseeing the workforce. So it is huge. Okay, the temple was then constructed, and it goes into all the details of how they did it. Here's a model of how it may have looked with there's the temple toward the back, and this would be the court of the women here.
Were you there?
So, I was not there. This was destroyed by the Babylonians, so no.
He's not that
I'm
old.
not that
He was
old.
born just a little bit after.
I'm not Dr. Christensen.
Any architect?
Our history teacher in seminary, his last name was Christensen. Or Christian, rather. And so the joke was, it was Christian.
This was Christian?
It was just Christian. Dr. Christian. And so the joke was that they first called him Christian in Antioch. And he had a great sense of humor. So here's another artist rendition of what the Temple of Solomon may have looked like, the temple building itself. Okay?
That would have been the inner portion of that?
Yeah, it's the inner portion. Okay. So they do render, you can see some of the outer portion, but this is just focusing on what it would have looked like. Massive building, outside all in this cut limestone, and I'll show you a picture of what it might look like inside. But next, in chapter 7, we have construction of Solomon's palace, and it may not sound quite as big compared to places today, but for the ancient times, this is huge. It ends up, it's 30 by 50 cubits, which ends up being about 3,400 square feet per floor, not counting the outside porticos. So it's a fairly large place.
And it takes him longer to build than it took to build the temple. Would that be because less people are working on it? Or?
Everything's concentrated on the temple. This is just his own project. And remember, this particular palace was built for his wife, who was the Pharaoh's daughter. Very important political alliance. So early on, he has all sorts of political alliances through marriage. That's the first one. The furnishings of the temple are described in chapter 7 in quite detail. And as soon as everything is there, they bring the Ark of the Temple, or the Ark of the Covenant in. And when they bring it in, the Shekinah glory drives the priests out. That's the second time that happened. When the tabernacle was done, the Shekinah glory, they couldn't stay in because of the presence of the Lord. The same thing happened here. The priests had to leave once the Ark was brought in. Solomon then has, he addresses the people, and then about what is being done, and then there's his prayer of dedication, which is a beautiful prayer, which basically kind of comes down to this, that God would hear the prayers that are offered in the temple, or people are away who pray toward the temple, that they're praying to that God, and whatever the prayer, the petition might be, that God would grant it. So he sees the temple himself as this is the place to meet with God and to pray, to approach him, to petition him. So a prayer of dedication. After that, he charges the people to walk with the Lord, and then they have a dedicatory sacrifices. I am assuming there's a lot of people there. They sacrificed 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. And they fed all the people for 8 days. That's a lot of animals. That's a lot.
Especially when you don't have any. What we
So,
have tonight.
but that says something about the accumulation of wealth that already had happened by that time. Okay, here's a artist rendition from the outside court, and then a cutaway view of what the temple may have looked like. So a little enlargement on that. So this would be the altar of sacrifice. So the brazen altar, and it's sitting on oxen. I'm not sure that it was in steps, and I believe they were supposed to have it sloped, not stepped. But inside, you have to remember, they use a wood, but they cover everything with gold. So it doesn't take much in the way of lamps to make it very bright in there, because it's just going to keep reflecting back and forth. So it had been very bright and would have been easily seen from wherever, because the light reflecting like that and shining out. So palm trees and seraphim and cherubim, the pomegranates, all this kind of stuff that's supposed to be there. The Ark of the Covenant there. But remember, when they pulled the Ark of the Covenant, the poles stuck out. The poles were longer. So it's just an artist's rendition. Don't think of it necessarily look like this, but it gives you some idea. Bright, beautiful inside. But of course, only the priests are going in there in this part, and only the high priest into the Holy of Holies once a year. Okay? God then recounts his covenant with Solomon, and it's basically this: if you keep my covenant, I will bless you. If you don't keep my covenant, you will be cursed. Sort of like we saw in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Kind of a constant theme, right? Played out in the Judges. You follow me, you're blessed. You don't, you're going to have exactly what I told you. So he warned Solomon, keep the covenant. If you do, these will be the blessings. If you don't, you will have problems. Well, Solomon did well for a while, but there were things that started off fairly soon that started creating problems. First of all, he made a deal with Hiram, and then he gave Hiram 12 cities, but then it talks about 120 talents of gold, so Hiram actually paid him. He shouldn't be selling cities that belong to Israel. That's not part of the covenant. That wasn't right. Now, he also enslaved the Canaanites. Pharaoh actually did better. Pharaoh came up and he captured Gezer, which is on the plains just below the Shephelah, kind of on the margin between the coastal plains, Shephelah, due west of Jerusalem. And he gave it to Solomon as a wedding present for his daughter, whom Solomon married. He knew what to do with Canaanites. He destroyed them. Solomon instead enslaved them instead of destroying them. That was a problem that was occurring during the time of the Judges. Solomon did the same thing. That wasn't right. Then he started multiplying his wealth. And he wasn't supposed to do that according to Deuteronomy 17. Yep. God would make him wealthy. You don't need to multiply it. Then he also multiplied horses. That would be his army, and he wasn't supposed to be doing that either. Again, according to Deuteronomy and what the kings were supposed to do, and he didn't. He would send away and bring and import all these horses for an increasing sized army. And then probably the worst is that he multiplied his wives. And the big problem with this is that the foreign wives started turning his heart away from God, because they came in with their idols and their foreign gods, and he let them keep them. So here was a problem. And eventually he starts being swayed and falls into idolatry and ends up worshiping the idols alongside with his wives.
Would the marriage of the foreign wives, wouldn't that have been against the Levitical law as well?
It actually comes out more a little later, because there were provisions where if you captured, you defeated an enemy, not the Canaanites, but an enemy, then you could keep the women who had not been married for yourself. And then there was whole things about what she is to be given, what her rights would be. This has a lot more to do with their foreign women, and they're coming in and they're changing because they have not come in and assimilated into Israel. they've come in as invaders, invited invaders, if that's a good way to put it. Those have ramifications. You need to understand, any country has a culture. And if you're not careful, you lose your culture when you're inviting people who are coming in and do not assimilate. They're bringing their culture. Well, their culture will change yours. And it does. And that's what happened. So it changed the king's heart. We understand what it did for the rest. You go back to Numbers. The end of Numbers is what was Balaam's advice to Moab. How can you get God to curse these people? Send in your women. Was it 22,000 ended up dying? It's a serious problem. This always has been a problem. The intermarriage and ending up switching gods. No, you have to maintain your culture. Strangers are welcome in, but they have to assimilate into your culture. That was what Israel was supposed to be doing. The strangers, the Gentiles, supposed to come to the temple and worship, not taking the people who are going to the temple and getting them up to the high places to worship idols. So because of this, the foreign wives turning Solomon's heart to idolatry, it resulted in his chastening, and he's warned. The Lord is going to split the kingdom, but it's going to wait until the reign of Solomon's son. It would not be done under Solomon, but it's going to be done. And in fact, the Lord sent adversaries. Solomon had peace. Now he starts having border problems, and there's wars that are starting to be fought. In addition, there was a fellow named Jeroboam, who had been, he was a young man. He was shown to be very diligent. Solomon even liked him. But the prophet Ahijah met him and gave him 10 pieces of silver and told him, you're taking 10 tribes. Appointed him as king for 10 tribes. Solomon would just be left with 2. From that point on, Solomon sought to kill Jeroboam. He fled down to Egypt, and he doesn't come back till Solomon is dead. But already now the kingdom's going to be divided. It's already set up for that to happen. Okay, next week we'll get to Rehoboam. So that's Solomon's reign.
Was there anything, it was Judah and Benjamin
Judah and Benjamin.
so why wouldn't the other 10 go to Jeroboam? Like, was there...
Well, we'll get to that when we get to Rehoboam.
Oh,
You're working ahead. That's fine. Exactly what God said was going to happen. It would be split.
what is the Talmudic
The Talmud, that would be the rabbis' writings on the Torah and the prophets and stuff. So according to what the rabbis wrote, this is what they thought happened. So ancient tradition.
I have a question.
Sure.
It's in chapter 11 and verse 36, it says, to his son I will give 1 tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So he's talking about the 10 tribes, and then he talks about 1 tribe. So
Judah stays with him, and so does Benjamin. So the 10 northern tribes all go. Benjamin seems to be kind of just caught up with Judah
okay.
because they're almost encompassed by Judah.
Okay. I was like, this only adds to 11.
Well, remember the Levites end up being split too. All right, let's go to Song of Solomon.
It's interesting that Jeremiah is the author of 1st and 2nd Kings.
That's who would thought to be the author. So author is meaning that he is compiling, because you'll see references throughout it according to the writings of this prophet, this other prophet, all through their different reigns. So he has access to this stuff. Jeremiah was in the court, and so he's the one who's compiling all this stuff together. So that's more of an editor than anything else.
Okay.
Might be a better way to put it, because he's taking the records and putting it together.
Mhm.
All right, we're going to do Song of Solomon first, because that's written at early within his reign, and then we'll go to Ecclesiastes. Song of Solomon is also called Song of Songs, Best of Songs. Those would be the Hebrew designations for it. And then you'll find in some versions or old commentaries it's called Canticles. That's from the Latin, which means song. So that's where Canticles comes from. The author is Solomon. A lot of references within it to him. His description of Solomon. Probably written early within his reign, and his reign was from 971 to 931 BC, so somewhere in the early period would fit. The theme, did you do a theme?
Yeah, marital love.
Love and marriage, go together like a horse and carriage. You remember that song, John?
He wasn't there when the temple was there.
Man. Frank Sinatra.
Okay.
Okay. Not that long ago. All right. So, God's favorable view of love and marriage demonstrated by the wooing and the wedding of the Shulamite shepherdess by King Solomon. All right. Simple outline. However you designate it, there seems to be at least 4 different major movements within it. And remember, it is a song, so it's poetry. And so how it's done, it's interesting. This also has sort of there's one place there's like a refrain. There's other places where the daughters of Jerusalem jump in, and one place where that must be the brothers or something jump in. And that's how it's put together. So it's poetry. So falling in love, or the courtship period, then united in love, so you get the wedding, then there's some struggling, and he goes away, and she can't find him, and missing him, and then they're growing in love, chapter 7 through 8. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I need to go grab something real fast.
What did you say?
She said it sounds familiar because I always leave.
Every morning.
Jeff, why are you always leaving?
I only left for a long period once since we've been married.
How long was that?
An hour.
Sunday to Wednesday.
That's a long time.
Where'd you go?
Your priorities, Jeff.
In a few months, I'm gonna leave for 4 months.
That's ridiculous.
I'm afraid of what he's getting.
I know. Did you see the smirk on his face?
Yeah.
Is this still streaming?
So
Can
the
everybody hear what we're saying?
before he married
If you
the
don't talk
foreign
to it, it
wives. No.
It picks up very well.
Solomon probably wrote this. Pastor, did Solomon write this book before he married the foreign wives?
Don't know how many there are. We know by this point,
A lot.
toward the end of it, there is a harem. And he has concubines.
Yeah.
So she's somewhere in the middle of the 1,000.
Also, she wasn't the first wife.
No,
Oh.
she's not the first. She
Just-
definitely is not the first.
Just one of them.
She's just one of them.
Wow.
I'll point that out toward the end. Song of Solomon is a good book to demonstrate what happens when you don't believe the text and you want to use allegory to come up with something. And Song of Solomon, because people are, I don't know, what do we call it, prudish or something, it's like, could God really be favorable to marital love? Yes, he created it. It's his design, period. Proverbs talks about it too. And because it's fairly this is a lot of poetic language, it was seen as something to be careful of. My understanding is Jewish tradition was you weren't supposed to read it till you were at least 30. It seems a little strange since their tendency was to marry in their teens, but
And they were dead at 40.
I don't know. And yeah, you're dead at 40, you can probably read it. Whether that's true or not, I actually don't know, but it seems like most people throughout history have always tried to make this an analogy of something. And during the Reformation period, there was an emphasis upon trying to make everything Christological. Everything had to do with Christ, no matter what it was. Christ is the center of our lives. He's the main center, but there's a lot of ancillary things that he favors, and this is one of them. Song of Solomon is not about Jesus. Some people might think I'm a little heretical about that. But how much can you wax eloquent if you can use analogy? Now, Song of Solomon is 8 chapters, right? Mm-hmm. It encompasses how many pages in your Bible?
5 and 1/6.
5 and a 6. So less than 6 pages in any standard Bible. This is John Gill's work on the Song of Solomon.
Oh, yeah.
That's just the Song of Solomon. Now, admittedly, it's fairly large type, okay?
Still.
But how do you go on for... Well, actually, it's a little interesting because he goes in sections. Covers it. Yes. Exposition of the book of Psalm and Song, commonly called Canticles, in 2 volumes.
So that's volume 1?
This is,
No.
they compiled them together.
Oh, okay.
So the first volume is 340 pages.
First 4 chapters?
And the second volume is 335 pages. Yep. Not bad. 1805. And yes, by the second volume, he's up to chapter 4, verse 12.
Nice.
Yeah, it is nice. Interesting reading.
You got you to buy the book?
So I bought it for this purpose, to show it for classes like this, is this is what happens when you go allegorical.
Yeah.
You can make it mean anything you want. And we don't take it that way. Song of Solomon is poetry. It's written in a context, and it's written to celebrate God's view of marriage. That's what it's all about. So falling in love, united in love, struggling in love, growing in love. Okay, so we're going to go over this fairly fast. So the first section, the courtship, there's the bride's longing is described. Her longing for Solomon describes him. And then there's a phrase, the daughters of Jerusalem, almost sing like a refrain or something. And then she's insecure about it, and the daughters of Jerusalem get involved again there in verse 8. Let's see, let's pull out my... Verse, you have to pay a lot of attention to the pronouns here. How do we know that the daughters of Jerusalem get involved? It's end of the second part of verse 4. We will rejoice. No, it's not an I or you, it's a we. So it's a plural getting involved in. We rejoice in you and be glad. We extol your love more than wine. Rightly do they love you. Verse 8. You yourself do not know, most beautiful among women. So it's talking about her, go forth and trail the flock, pasture are your young goats, like tents and shepherds. Then verse 9 goes to me, and so we're back to Solomon. So keeping that in order is not necessarily easy, but the indicators are there. So it's going back and forth between her speaking, him speaking, and then a refrain with other people getting involved and commenting on it. But that would be the first part. There was this her longing, the daughters of Jerusalem refrain, her insecurity, the daughters of Jerusalem get involved with that. So then there's the courtship period, starting in verse 9. Solomon praises the Shulamite, the daughters of Jerusalem refrain and accent what Solomon said, yes, how beautiful you are. Verse 18. So they're going back and forth, kind of admiring each other, and it goes back and forth in the first section of this courtship. I guess that's like courtship, right? One praises the other, then the other, it's just mutual, and then, oh, I'm going to do it again, and the other one does it, and then the friends gather around and say, yes, this is wonderful and beautiful. Right, better than a Hallmark movie. Okay, there it is. You know, they could make a Hallmark movie out of this.
Yes.
Well, it depends how you do it.
Well,
Do remember, though, that this was an agriculturally based society, so when it talks about teeth like goat's milk and things like that, I mean, that doesn't thrill us.
Jeff never says that to me.
Oh,
wow, Jeff, that's not
I'll
nice.
start. I'm so sorry. Pastor Harris is gonna disappoint
you know,
me.
and yeah, someone's like, huh? Well, what they thought was beautiful was related to the agricultural community, so, but that'd be the poetry in it. But it's back and forth, praising each other and what they find desirable. And then in the courtship, there's a recounting of, she remembers when Solomon came to had an earlier visit, and then she has this dream, and she misses him, and she goes looking for him. She takes a while, she finally finds him, and it's rejoicing, and then there's a wedding procession, which is kind of a third person. What is this coming up in the wilderness? Like columns of smoke, and then going on, and so there's a procession is what's being described there for this wedding. And then again, Solomon praises his bride for her beauty. Yeah, your eyes are like doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats. Would that throw you, Elena, if Brian's, your hair is like a flock of goats?
It depends on how he said
But
it.
would it surprise you if I said
Would be his tone.
Yes.
It wouldn't though.
Oh, it would? Oh, no.
Hear that? It wouldn't surprise
Yes,
you.
and then she'd grab your beard and go, oh, like a billy goat.
Like a gazelle.
Yeah, it's a gazelle. But again, that has a lot more to do. It's just, it's an agricultural community, and so here it's like, it's abundant is the idea here. Overflowing with hair. Okay? And not that long streaming time. Abundant like a flock of goats. They liked, I guess, curly hair.
So it'd be like saying Nicole has teeth like an iPhone. They're shiny.
Okay. Hey, however
He's
you
so
want to write the
romantic.
poetry, as long as she likes it, you're okay. The marriage is consummated, the end of chapter 16, beginning for chapter 5. Then the bride has this dream of separation in the beginning of chapter 5. I was asleep, my beloved was knocking, and can't find him. Finally, he has to go looking for him. The daughters of Jerusalem join in. You know, what's your beloved like, O most beautiful among women? What kind of beloved is your beloved that you thus adjure us? Well, how can we help? What is he like? How are we going to find this guy? And so she describes him, prays for the groom's handsomeness. I guess they like dove eyes, what's another one in here? Cheeks are like a bed of balsam. Okay? Some of their abdomen is carved ivory inlaid with sapphires. You don't get that by going to the gym, I'll tell you that. That's better than the gym. So they praise each other. She searched for the beloved, the daughters of Jerusalem. Again, where's the beloved gone? Where's your beloved turned, that we may seek him with you, so they're going to help. And she finally tells him, I think you'll basically find him over here. And they do, and then he praises her beauty, and the daughters of Jerusalem chime in again in verse 10. And again, poetic. Solomon then departs, verse 11. I went down to the orchard of nut trees to see the blossom of the valley, to see whether the vine had budded, pomegranates had bloomed. For I was aware, my soul set me up over the chariots of my noble people. So he was busy doing an action. So he's out with the army. You know, he went down to check his crops, and the next thing you know, he's out with the army. And of course, now she's like, the cry is, come back, come back, return. And he continues and prays the Shulamite. Chapter 7, verse 10, there's this desire that she has that he would travel with her to orchards and to villages, and then eventually just that she has desire to take him to her own home. And the daughters of Jerusalem chime in again. Let me go back up to chapter 6, look at verse 9 at the end of it. My dove, my perfect one, is unique. She is her mother's only daughter. She is pure of the one who bore her. The maiden saw her and called her blessed. The queens and the concubines also, they praised her. So that's why we know this is later. She's not the first. Queens plural, concubines plural. So queens are the ones that he married. The concubines, which I never quite understood. I get wives, but not a legal right to anything. So journey of and homecoming, there's a picture of love in verse 5 that would, I guess, country musicians could write something about that. Yeah, love flashes or flashes of fire. Okay. 8 and 9 seems to be protection of her. My little sister will build a wall and a battlement, and she's. It says brothers, but earlier on it said she's the only child. So it's somebody. There's those who want to protect. Solomon then, it ends with Solomon wanting to, he had the Shulamite's garden is described, and then Solomon wants to hear her voice, and she urges him to hurry. Be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. I'm not sure what a stag on the mountain spices are, but it sounds poetic, and I'm sure the ladies like it. Sounds quite nice, yeah, except spicers. I mean, I'm on a run. I want something solid on my feet, not a mountain of things that are moving around me. But that's poetry. But it is, again, the idea is that God does approve of marriage and marital intimacy. And even though some things seem a little explicit, it is done poetically, so it's not titillating, so it doesn't fit with that. You'd have to have kind of a perverse mind to make it into something like that, but a lot of people do, and they'll go to that and say, look at God, it's pornographic. No, it's not pornographic. I think that reflects more the mind of the individual than anything else. All right, let's take a couple minutes, and then we'll go into Ecclesiastes. We'll end the evening with vanity.
How's that word again?
Which one?
The self.
Gazelle?
Yeah.
That's kind of an antelope.
I can't.
Deer. It's a type of deer.
Okay.
Gazelle.
Okay, it's back on.
All right, let's go up to the.
Now, get up.
Okay, Ecclesiastes. And again, if you're tuning in, you can go to gracebibleny.org/old-testament-survey, and you'll find PDFs on that page to download. All right, Ecclesiastes, the author is Solomon. This is at the end of his life. Several references that look like it has to be him. In fact, I don't think there's really any question about it. Tradition as well says it. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. So it tells you he's got to be one of the kings. Later on, he talks about he was greater and more wealthy than all who went before them. Kind of eliminates everybody except Solomon. So date then late in his reign toward the end, so we're looking at like 935 BC, somewhere in there. No, wait, I can do that.
The warnings against striving after vanity.
Okay. Yeah. Life lived apart from God is vanity, it's empty, it's futility, emptiness, chasing after the wind. And that's really part of it, because it is this, if you're trying to live your life apart from God, here's where you're going to go. There is ultimately just vanity, futility. It's worth nothing. And we certainly see that in our own society as we've shifted away as a society from God, of people recognizing that there's no purpose. There's whole genres of songs that are just nihilistic. There's just no purpose. And people live that way. Well, there's no purpose. Well, I'll at least just do this. They have no meaning. Nothing. There's nothing there. Basic outline: futility of human endeavor, futility of human achievement, personal experience, personal observation, limitations of human wisdom, that man doesn't know the plan of God and doesn't know his own time and time of the future, and the conclusion, we're joyously responsible in the fear of God, and that's going to be the conclusion. It has to do with the fear of God. So let's look at it a little more in depth. First of all, the introduction is that life under the sun, S-U-N, is boring. Because the sun, the wind, the rivers, they continue to do just what they do. Rivers keep flowing to the sea's never full, nothing's ever achieved here. The sun keeps circling, it keeps rising and setting, day in, day out, day in, day out. And the wind, interesting how he puts it, it circles. Comes from the north, sweeps down, then sweeps back from the south and goes north, it just circles. And he didn't even have satellite imaging to show it. We knew it. And so all things then are full of labor and become wearisome. And there's really then nothing new under the sun. Kipling had an interesting statement. So the craft that we call modern, the crimes we call new. John Bunyan had them typed and filed in 1682.
I talked about John Bunyan today with John.
He did.
Yeah.
Who said that?
Kipling. Yeah, there is nothing new under the sun. So he's saying here it is like, this is all, we think there's nothing new. And so for Solomon it becomes, it's a vanity, and that becomes the illustration. So the first is the futility of human achievement from and demonstrated. First is the vanity of human wisdom. And Solomon talks about exploring wisdom, madness, and folly, and he finds it all eventually chasing after the wind. And that's a good description. If you chase after the wind, can you catch it? So it's a good illustration of just futility, which is what vanity has to do. and therefore it becomes a source of grief and pain. He also then tests the vanity of pleasure, and he finds it futile. That's laughter, madness, and interesting how he describes using wine without getting drunk. Still has full capability, but letting whatever buzz without getting drunk. And still, it's all vanity. There's nothing here. There's nothing of substance. He pursues materialism and hedonism. He buildings. He builds all sorts of stuff. There's architecture. He's horticulture, all sorts of plants, agriculture, crops. He has lots of slaves to do his work, so there's ease of life for him. He's got singers to entertain him, and have radios or CDs or iPods or any of that kind of stuff. But he had his live choir whenever he wanted. They were there. He had concubines. All this was for his pleasure, to see if there's something meaningful, and he's just striving after the land. There's no profit. That's verses 4 through 12. And he considered wisdom, madness, and folly as well, and yet, as he experienced all it wasn't worth anything. It was just vanity. His personal experience, he looked at his labor, his accomplishments, and ultimately he saw that the fruit of his labor was in vain, because you're going to leave it to whoever comes after you. You don't know if they're going to be wise or a fool. So you labor all your life, and here's your nest egg. You don't get it. The person behind you gets it. And what are they like? How many people have become very wealthy and left it their children who squandered it? Some losing it all. It wasn't helpful to the kids. The kids were in bad shape afterward. So the result of that is despair. So he has a conclusion then that be content. And this keeps coming up to Ecclesiastes. These just little statements where he's pushing towards what's going to become the end. Be content with basically with what God has given you. You need to enjoy with God, because hope must be above what is under the sun. It's got to be something beyond this. In fact, it has to be something invisible, because he explored everything that's visible and there's nothing there. So whatever hope we have must be something invisible. It's got to be beyond this world and something invisible. So learn to be content. And then, so he's had experience, these are things he's done, and then he's made observation. And in chapter 3, you have that whole section. There's a time for everything. There's an appropriate time for every single thing. So you're actually never too late or never too early. There's an appropriate time for it. At least in God's timing, it's not going to be that way, because he's ultimately in control. Interesting, he has this phrase here, God has set eternity in his heart. That's in the heart of man. That's why you don't have to argue somebody into believing God. It's already there. They have to purposely work to try and get rid of that knowledge. And then they have to keep convincing themselves. That's why atheists are so upset and mad and fight against a being they don't believe exists. Now there's real intelligence. I'm mad at something I don't believe exists. But that's the nature of man. It's in his heart, and so man knows it's there. Now this is all from the idea of his personal experience. In fact, in this section, the personal pronoun I is used 7 times. He speaks about things that we would like to have happen. Justice here, he says unexpected. That's verse 16. There's a lot of things that are just unknown to man as well. But again, unknown to man because he's talking from the perspective of his experience, his observations. There is much we can know because God's revealed it to us. Those are solid for us. But without that, what do you really know? Anything? Man without God becomes animalistic, verses 19 through 21. Fate of the sons of men is the fate of the beast the same. So one dies, so do the other. Indeed, all By the same breath, there's no advantage for man over beast, all is vanity. That's really encouraging, isn't it?
Mm.
But there's where a lot of society are.
Yeah.
They want to make out like we're just beasts.
Yeah.
There's no hope in that. All go to the same place, all came from the dust, which returned to dust. And he expands on that is, cynical. Here, does your breath ascend upward, or the breath of the beast ascend downward? Which is it? I have seen that nothing is better than that man should be happy in his activities, for that is his lot, for who will bring him to see what will occur after him? So even in cynicism, he at least sees that self-pity is ridiculous and not something worth pursuing. It's not an option. Even a cynic then comes as you make the most of what you have because you don't understand, if you're humble enough to at least admit that. And how many of these cynical people want to demand it's their way? Well, if they were smart, they'd recognize there's too much that they don't know, and if you don't know, make the most of what you got with hope that there's something beyond it, right? That would make more sense. Continuing with personal observations, he notices there's not inequalities of life. So life under the sun, without God, there is oppression. Interesting, Solomon's king, and he still talks about he observes oppression. So there's things happening, he can't even stop himself. Because he's only one king. You can't stop everything that goes on because it happens before you find out about it. There's oppression. In cynicism, and a cynic that can go this way, is congratulate the dead. They don't have to deal with anything. Congratulate even more those never born. They don't have to deal with anything. That's a pretty poor view of life. And yet if you're nihilistic, that's kind of where people end up. You're better off dead, hence the idea of suicide. You're better off dead. Are you? Well, the Christian can be, but we have a different purpose in life, so we're better off being alive and serving Christ until he calls us home. So as Paul says, we're betwixt the two. If you're cynic, are you better off dead? No, because you don't know what lies on the other side. Scripture tells us, and it's not good. It's not good for the sinner. How many people would say, at least they're out of their suffering? They're not a Christian, their suffering just began. And will go on for eternity. So a lot of these things are very practical. The scriptures give us the other side of it. But here's the cynic. Labor becomes futile because there's no end for it. There's no real good basis. Interesting statement he makes is that labor is pursued because of rivalry between people. In other words, you're pursuing this. Are you doing this because you actually think it's going to help you, or because you're trying to keep up with the Joneses or show that you got more or are better than? But how many people live that way? My friend got this, I got to get it too. I got to show I'm better than so-and-so, and so they make their quest in life to make sure they make more money than their brother, because they got sibling rivalry, or I have more prestige, or all the rest of it. Frankly, here's one of the negatives about Trump, is this whole idea is he's a winner. Well, in what way? He's won some things, he's lost some things, and he keeps getting up and going. But ultimately, you're only a winner if you got Christ. So he has this disparaging. There's a problem right there. So is that rivalry? It certainly sounds that way. That's a terrible motive. I do something simply to show that I'm better than somebody else, or I'm a rival to somebody else, I can achieve more. What happened to doing something because it actually...
The right thing.
Well, how about even from the selfish side, because it actually pleases you? So you're busy doing something you don't even like just to say I'm better than so-and-so, and you don't even like doing it. How about, as kids, I dare you. And you feel, I got to take the dare. Why? I don't want to do that. That's stupid.
Pride.
It's pride. Well, of course I'll do it. I can show I'm brave, and I'm as brave and stupid as you are. So yes, I'll take your dare. Where do we go with these things? But yet this is human existence. He just points that out. He also says you're pursuing these things and it never satisfies the eyes. all your labor, will your eyes ever be satisfied? In the end, no. I think it was David I was talking to. He was talking about, he's been able to do a lot of traveling. And he said the problem with traveling is the more you travel, the more you want to travel because there's got to be something else to see. Maybe it was better in my grandparents' generation. I think my grandfather did get out of state. I think he moved to Alabama, but that was only like 25 miles away. My grandmother did come out and see us in California, but their generation didn't go much. And the generation before that, you probably never even got out of your county. So you might see a picture. So if you went someplace, you talk about the rest of your life. Are you ever satisfied with seeing? I lost count. I haven't checked the site I go for weather. I haven't even looked to see if it still has it. It used to have these pictures, and they got over 1 million. So how many pictures do you keep looking at? I don't know. I could look at probably some.
Just one more.
Just one more. Wow, I wonder what it looks like here, and the same spot. I wonder if it looks like in a little different light, a little time of day. You're never satisfied. And that's kind of the mindset he has through this whole thing. He explored everything to that degree. There's always this desire for more. How much? What as Rockefeller was asked, how much is enough?
One more.
$1 more.
Yeah.
You'll never make it. It's always $1 more. There seems to be a reference to David here. It says 13, a poor yet wise lad is better than an old and foolish king who no longer knows how to receive instruction. For he has come out of prison to become king, even though he is born poor in his kingdom. I have seen all the living under the sun throng to the side of the second lad who replaces him. There's no end of all the people, to all who are before him, even the ones who will come later will not be happy with him, for this too is vanity and striving after the wind. Doesn't matter who you are, eventually people tire of you. So he's talking about a king. Now think about it. If this is referencing David, then I think it is. So Solomon hears about it growing up, about Saul and what he was like. When Saul first started, he was acclaimed, wasn't he? Saul has killed his thousands, and the people were so happy with him. So David starts rising. David's killed his 10,000. Saul gets upset, gets jealous, and he becomes foolish. The kingdom is taken away from him. His dynasty is taken away, then the kingdom is taken away, and he ends his life in battle, in despair. David then is acclaimed. And finally the whole kingdom, and it's David is great, and everybody's happy with the kingdom's expanding. What was it like at the end of his reign? His son rebels against him and seeks to establish a coup. He's got Shimei throwing rocks at him. What happened? Put it in a modern realm. What president after 8 years isn't just pretty much done because approval ratings just plummet? No matter how well they did, we tire and we want something different. That's the way people are. We have to have a different mindset. There's going to be something other than that. Because Solomon is, again, these are my experience. This is what I've observed. This is the way things normally are. Fame is going to drop. Your popularity will diminish. Because in the end, people forget, they want something new, and they also want something from their own generation. Every generation thinks somehow it's wiser than the one before, and they always tend to prove that they're stupider. We're not as wise as those who went before. Well, part of it's because they get in while they're young, and they don't have the wisdom yet. And they gain it before they're over, but they cause a lot of problems before they finish. All right. Then he talks about the folly of hard work. There's advantages of being in partnership, advantages of not being alone. He talks about that too. You can work hard, someone else gets the proceeds of it, or someone else takes it, steals it. Then the advantages of partnership and not being alone. That's where a strand of 2 or 3 cords is not easily broken. If you're alone, all this stuff is even worse. Okay, the folly of fame. That was referring to David there in 13 through 16, and that it's all these things end up just not quite what you thought they were when you started in on it. There's got to be something more to life than that stuff. So, but yet these are the things that people pursue, thinking that's where meaning is going to be found. Or I remember some good illustrations with. So Disney was doing that for a while, right? To get somebody, they won the Super Bowl or the World Series, and get a camera out there and like, well, now that you've won the World Series, now what are you going to do? I'm going to go to Disneyland. Wow, like somehow this is better? You just won the epitome. You've done everything you wanted in your sport. You're at the top. And now what? A lot of interviews for these guys is like, there's nothing left. They did it. What's left in life? Disneyland. Yeah, you get to go to fantasy because obviously reality isn't what I want it to be anymore. I've already done it, already achieved it. It's all downhill from here. Unless you have a purpose beyond that stuff. Actually, I have to make a comment. President Bush, he definitely demonstrated by his life as a man that he had a purpose beyond it. Because he ended up in the pinnacle of power, and when he was no longer there, he was a gracious man and he found other things to do. He continually found a purpose for his life. I remember there was some of the pictures of him jumping out of airplanes.
90 years old.
At 90 years old, yeah, it's like he's got someone attached to him now, but it's like, I'm still enjoying life. And he was always gracious. He wasn't in competition. So I'm here to serve. He didn't get caught up in this kind of stuff Ecclesiastes is talking about. He saw something more important. Didn't get caught in the folly of flame and all the rest. All right, more personal observations, the insufficiency of human religion.
President John Adams.
5:1 and it's interesting sections, you read through it, but what you keep finding in this section is that a proper religion is founded in the fear of God and will result in keeping vows instead of saying foolish and rash things. Most religions is I'm making this promise, I'm going to do this, or I'm trying to achieve something, but I don't really have a fear of God. It's something else I'm trying to gain. And human religions are simply insufficient. Don't let your speech cause you to sin. Guard your steps, verse 1, you go to the house of God, draw near to listen rather than to offer sacrifice of fools, for they do not know what they're doing. So they're going in, and they're supposedly going through the motions, but they don't really know God. So don't get caught up in that either. Okay, more personal observation, the insufficiency of wealth. Wealth does not satisfy, because there's always this continued quest for increased wealth, and as you increase your wealth, what increases as well are those who consume it. You get increased problems. So the more wealth you have, the more people you have latching onto you trying to suck it out of you. Interesting, it says the poor people sleep well. Rich people don't. And it actually says because their full stomachs keep them from sleeping. Well, I've had that. I had too much to eat before I went to bed, and just you can't sleep all night, or you really have really, really bizarre dreams.
Hot chocolate does it to me.
Hot chocolate does that to you?
Oreos do.
Oh man, hot chocolate with Oreos. No wonder. Got sugar high. So he also talks about the problems wealth brings. Hoarding, he says, is evil. He talks about those, the rich is easily lost on bad investments. Wall Street Journal had an article on some kind of fund where the guy's, I guess, been doing pretty well, but he's always been right on the edge on on futures market, and he not only lost everything, he lost more than everything because he had people backing up what he had that wasn't their money, so they actually lost more than 100%. How do you do that? And I had a quote from somebody, investors are people who play with your money until they lose it all. Investment advisors. Investment advisors are those who play with your money until they lose it all. So, I mean, how that happens so often, and then it's gone. That's a problem. Another problem of wealth is, well, you can't take it with you. It's staying here.
Stock market.
Yeah, up, down, currently down.
They're on
See
their
what it
phone,
goes.
they're screaming,
Oh,
funding it. And then they're saying, I'm rich the next.
And it's all on paper. It's not, you don't have any of that unless you cash it out.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're supposedly saying that you lost, but did you really lose if you didn't?
The lawyers are running up to you.
You know, yeah, it's all there. Then there's the guy who said, I'm going to try and take it with me, and so in his will he had it was supposed to be converted to gold, and then his lawyer was supposed to handle all this and put the gold in the grave with him. And so his lawyer, of course, you had to do something with the gold before you do anything with it, so he put it in an account and had an account, and so he wrote a check and put it in the grave with the body. There it is.
All these lawyers, oh man.
I like that one. Yeah, I wrote him a check. Here's his money. I'll keep the gold. He can have the check.
A money sign on the head.
Wealth comes from God, and the better attitude is enjoy what God gives you. Period. Verse 18. Here's what I've seen to be good and fitting: to eat, to drink, enjoy oneself in all one's labor in which he toils under the sun during the few years of his life which God has given him. There's the tie. Recognize it all, it's from God, period, whatever it is, for this is his reward. Furthermore, as for every man to whom God has given riches and wealth, he has also empowered him to eat from them, receive his reward, rejoice in his labor. That is the gift of God. For he will not often consider the years of his life, because God keeps him occupied with the gladness of his heart. Put it back in perspective. Seneca had an interesting statement, as a ancient Roman philosopher. Money has never made anyone rich. Think about that one. Money has never made anyone rich. More personal observations, just as the vanity of life itself, some reprise on the idea of the vanity of wealth. You succeed, someone else gets it. That happens a lot. You succeed, someone else gets it. Whether they've stolen it, got taxed out of it, business transaction, or you die. Then things like children. Children are a blessing, but he is very careful here. But if you do not enjoy them and what God gives you along with them, then they're not a blessing. Because you have them, but you've done nothing with them. There's no relationship, even to the point where they don't even bury you properly when you die, because there's no relationship. You live in vain, you're going to go into obscurity, and the future generations are not even going to remember you. So make sure you're doing it correctly. Enjoy your children while you've got them. Labor, there's vanity in that, because you labor to feed yourself, and guess what returns within a few hours? I'm hungry again. So there's no end of it. The wise, they seek contentment in the present instead of all the stuff they're after. Desires will continue, new desires arise, and as soon as the previous ones are met, and that's part of life. So be content with what you have now. If you're always chasing a dream, there's always a different dream. You get one satisfied, and now there's next, right? You drive these fancy cars. That fancy car was someone's dream, right?
Yeah.
You ran into the guy with the Maserati. Now here's his dream, right? So now he gets his Maserati. What's next?
Michael wants one,
Spaceship.
really.
He wants a Maserati.
Yeah, he's looking at one.
Go to the toy store and find
Yes.
a little Matchbox Maserati and give it to him for Christmas.
Thank you.
Sir, here you are. And this one, you don't even have to insure. Because that's always the way it is. You have this, I achieved it, now what? So that becomes vanity. So desires need to be careful too. You can't dispute with God. He knows what's best for you in the brief life that you have. And it is brief. Verse 12, who knows what is good for a man during his lifetime, during a few years of his futile life? Well, who is that? There is someone who does. Man doesn't, but God does. He will spend them like a shadow. Who can tell a man will be after him under the sun? Only one. That's God. Life is brief. So we need to keep that in mind.
What does that word mean?
Brevity,
Yeah.
short. Brief. The brevity of life. And the older you get, the more you recognize it. Right? And there are people who consider us young, John.
Or keeping alive from the temple.
That's right.
I can't get caught up in that. I think of myself in 35 years I've
That's right.
lost. And I
Lost
do.
it. Yeah. But I'm not as old as the guy up in Poughkeepsie that was there when the tabernacle was built.
I want that sweater.
See? It's never ending. There's always a new desire.
Oh,
All right.
boy.
Now he changes. There's limitations on human wisdom. And this is really a humbling section. Because man doesn't know. And he contrasts wisdom and folly, verses 1 through 14. He covers things like a good name is better than perfume. It's better to be in a house of mourning where there's sadness because then you consider your end, rather than feasting because you're just lost up in the present. We should consider rebuke for the wise. Wise people want rebuke. We want to change. We want to get better. Proud people don't want it. The importance of patience, suppressing anger, not responding in anger, seeking after wisdom, and considering the work of God in everything. Then moderation perceives things correctly and is humble to avoid sin and seek to be upright as God has made them. And then wisdom works under authority as well. That's the strength of wisdom. Submission to authority is next. Verses 5 and 6. He who keeps a royal command experiences no trouble. A wise heart knows the proper time procedure. There's a proper time procedure for every delight. So even under authority, wisdom knows how to direct it so there's a proper respect for authority and even changing things, but done the right way. Because all authority eventually comes from God. Man's authority, though, becomes limited because man does not know. That people who seek after authority and think that somehow that's going to win ultimately have a problem because they can't even control the day, much less tomorrow. They think they can, they want to, but they can't. That's where politicians really err. They all think somehow they're going to bring about a better world, not if they're not doing it God's way. Because they can't control it. Things change too rapidly. You think things are going well, it changes in a moment. Look at the stocks. What, they lost, 800 yesterday?
Yeah.
Only 80 today.
Huh?
Only 80 today.
Only 80 today.
They were
That's a
down
lot less.
650, I
Like
think, at one
that.
point.
So dropped. And people put their heart and soul in that stuff. You think things are going well, next thing you know, here comes a disaster. Here comes a hurricane, or a tornado, or even something worse, from the standpoint of no warning. The ground starts shaking, and it all falls apart. Just in a moment. At least with a hurricane, you're told a couple days in advance. Tornado, you might get a few minutes warning. Earthquake, bang, there it is. Your life was set, and then you just lost it all. So we don't know. Authority isn't going to control these things, because God is the ultimate authority. And God's providence in all these things is mysterious, but it belongs to Him. Verse 18, here's what I've seen to be good and fitting, to eat, to drink, to enjoy oneself and one's labor. Oh, wait, that's the wrong chapter. I wonder if it would look right. 15, so I commended pleasure, for there is nothing good for a man under the sun except to eat, drink, and be merry. This will stand by him as toils throughout the days of his life. Here's the important phrase, which God has given him under the sun. If you remove that last part, you're ultimately back into fertility. You're back to hedonism. It's still not going to do you any good. It's a recognition that it's under God that we do all these things. And then 10 through 14 deals with ultimately man is going to be judged by God. 13, it will not be well for the evil man. He will not lengthen his days like a shadow because he does not fear God. That's a futility. And ultimately man does not understand. 16, when I gave my heart to know wisdom, to see the task which had been done on the earth, even though one should never sleep day or night, and I saw every work of God, I conclude that man cannot discover the work which had been done under the sun, even though man should seek laboriously, he will not discover, and though the wise man should say, I know, he cannot discover. It's beyond us. And that forces us to humility to rely upon the one who does know. We'll must have to leave it in his hands. You can strive, but ultimately it still comes back to God. So this whole section, there's a limit on human wisdom. He doesn't know the plan. Doesn't know the plan of God. Not unless you have the scriptures, and then you can look at what his plan is. But even there, the mind of a man plans his way, but who directs his steps? God does. So enjoy the journey. I know you thought you were going north, and next thing you know, he has you going west, and then reversing course and going east, and then south, and then back north. Who knows? But enjoy the journey. He knows exactly what you need, when you need it, and we can rely upon him on those things. If it's left to human wisdom, you're in trouble. He brings it even closer to home. Man does not know his own time or that to come. And he does. You don't even know the current day, much less tomorrow. So he encourages, enjoy the life that God grants to you, yet being diligent to work while you're alive, because the future is unknown. Evil, death, any of that can come suddenly. And even when wisdom is present, people often do not seek or heed it when it's given. We've all had that. Giving them good advice, and they don't do it. And then they reap the consequences. Verses 9, 1 through 6. Whoever is joined with the living, there is hope. Surely a live dog is better than a dead lion, for the living know they will die, but the dead do not know anything, nor have any longer reward, for their memory is forgotten. That's pretty sad. But while you're alive, if you do it right, you can learn and grow, right? Man's reward, verses 7 through 9. Humility. When wisdom... Let's see, 7 through 9. 9. Enjoy life with the woman whom you love all the days of your fleeting life, which he has given you under the sun, for this is your reward in life, in which you toil and which you have labored under the sun. So there's, again, this push of being content. There's a contentment that must be there. verses 10 through 18 deals with living wisely while you can. Whatever your hand finds to do, verily do it with all your might, for there's no activity or planning or wisdom in Sheol where you're going. You can only do it while you're here. So, why fall into depression? Get up and get going. You want to be depressed? Wait till you get to Sheol, then be depressed. Okay? Because humility and patience really make a big difference in how we live life. There's a weight to foolishness, chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. A wise man heart directs him toward the right, a foolish man's heart directs him toward the left. Even when a fool walks along the road, his sense is lacking, he demonstrates to everyone that he's a fool. It's easily seen. What's the difference between the two? So there's a weight in foolishness, it just compounds itself. Humility and patience better than popularity and partiality. He talks about the rules there. Let's see. An evil I've seen under the sun, like an arrow which goes forth from the ruler. Folly is set in many exalted places, while rich men sit in humble places. I've seen slaves riding on horses and princes walking like slaves in the land. You pursue those things and it can flip around on you very quickly. Verses 8 through 11, reasonable risks versus stupidity. And so there's warnings there. 10, if the axe is dull and he does not sharpen its edge, he must exert more strength. Wisdom has the advantage of giving success. So whatever you're doing, do it wisely and it will go better for you. So he's plugging away at that. 12 through 20 is all just the actions of various fools. And a lot of contrasting there. 18, through indolence the rafters sag, and through slackness the house leaks. That's part of foolishness. You don't repair things, so they're going to collapse and fall apart on you. And then chapter 11, 1 through 6 is all actions of the wise, and cautions against procrastination. Actually, this is a whole interesting chapter, but I'm not going to go into all the details. All these different things talk about what you should be doing and what people will do to delay it. Wise people, casting your bread on the surface of the waters, for after many days you'll find it. In others, invest. There is a return on that. Divide your portion to 7 or even 8. You do not know what misfortune may occur in early. Divest. In other words, go diversity. Not all your eggs in one basket. First rule of all investing. Diversify. Verse 2, if the clouds are full, they pour out rain upon the earth. And whether the tree falls toward the south or north, wherever the tree falls, there it lies. We can figure some things out. But he who watches the wind will not sow, and he who looks at the clouds will not reap. In other words, you got to get out there and do the work. If you're always looking for the best condition, it may never come. The clouds may bring rain, okay, but can you get your crop in before it rains? How much rain will it bring? You don't know. You're waiting for a day that is perfect, not going to happen. 5, just as you do not know the path of the wind or how bones are formed in the womb of a pregnant woman, so you do not know the activity of God that makes all things. So your seed in the morning, and do not be idle in the evening, for you do not know whether morning or evening sowing will succeed, or whether both of them will alike be good. Go out and do it. But people will procrastinate for all sorts of excuses and not do what needs to be done, right? Yeah. But you finally did make a phone call. And it's been good for you ever since.
And that was just
Your life has changed. So that's part of these different actions of don't get caught up in all the kind of procrastination that people do, because it's part of foolishness and gets you in trouble. There's a lot of various proverbs. Okay, 7 through 11 is the call to live joyously, responsibly, different ways. Again, another section with this: rejoice, young man, during your childhood, Let your heart be pleasant during the days of young manhood, and follow the impulse of your heart and desires of your eyes, yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things. In other words, while you're young, do what you can while you're young, because if you get old, because that's where he's going to go with the rest of the section, you can't do it. So, but remember, whatever it is you're pursuing, remember, God's going to judge you for it. You're still going to be held accountable. 10, so remove vexation from your heart, put away pain from your body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. Enjoy it while you can. It goes quickly. And that's good advice. While you're young, pursue what you can. It may not happen. You may not be able to do it later. Other things come up. 12, we usually refer to this as remember God in your youth. It's actually better phrased as remember God before you get old. Okay? And here's why. And
Says it too.
I will make a couple comments as this goes on. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, when you will say, I have no delight in them. Now he's going to explain why. Before the sun, the light, the moon, and the stars are darkened. Okay? Why are they darkened? Your eyes are going bad. You can't see as well. That's what it means, darkened. What do we call that? We have a surgery now that helps a lot with it, and most older people get it. I asked the doctor about it already. The average age is 72 for the surgery.
Cataracts?
That's to get your cataracts out. Everything grows dark. That's exactly what he's talking about.
Oh.
The clouds return after the rain. Still the same thing. I can't see. Usually after the rain it gets sunny, but it's still dark. And it's fuzzy. Your eyesight's going. In the day the watchmen of the house tremble, and the mighty men stoop. Okay, what happens as you get older?
Start shuffling around.
You start shuffling around, right? And you start getting smaller, and yeah, I can't make it there, my dear. Okay, right? You know,
That's a little too good.
That's a little too. Hey, Evan. By the time I get there, I
look
practiced all my
realistic.
life for this. As Diane said, she looked at my hands when I was young and said, "You remind me of my grandfather. My hands finally match my age. Praise God." Okay. The grinding ones stand idle because they are few. The grinding ones stand idle because they are few. Make sure you go to the dentist and get your checkup. They fall out. Okay? You're losing your teeth. Okay? And those who look through windows grow dim. So back, your eyesight's failing. The doors of the street are shut, and the sound of the grinding mill is low. Related to this, and we'll go that one. The grinding mill is low. I can't hear anymore. Hey! Hey!
No, that's my job.
Okay, that's your job. Okay, one will arise to the sound of the bird.
Can't sleep.
Can't sleep. You talk to older people, and it's just like, they're up so early in the morning, and they're napping all afternoon. It's because they can't sleep. Any little thing, they're awake. Okay, all the daughters of song will sing softly. Again, hearing is gone. Furthermore, men are afraid of high places and terrors on the road. They were adventurous when young, and now they don't want to go out the front door. All right, I know quite a few people who've reached that. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags himself along, the caperberry is ineffective, for man goes to eternal home while mourners go about in the street. All right, the next ones. Remember him before the silver cord is broken, the golden bowl is crushed, the pitcher by the well is shattered, the wheel at the cistern is crushed. All of those are euphemisms for death. The silver cord was the neck, you cut the spine, you're dead. The golden bowl, there it is. Pitcher by the well, not quite sure what that's referring to, but you can get it. You can't get anything anymore because you've broken your pitcher and the water's in the well. The wheel of the cistern is crushed. Can't do it. Dust will return to the earth as it was. The spirit will return to God who gave it. That's all death. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher, all is vanity. And so his purpose Remember God before you get old. And final conclusion, fear God, keep his commandments. In addition to being a wise man, the preacher also taught the people knowledge. He pondered, searched out, and arranged many proverbs. The preacher sought to find delightful words and write words of truth correctly. The words of wise men are like goads, and masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by one shepherd. But beyond this, my son, be warned, the writing of many books is endless, the excessive devotion books is wearing to the body. That's a good admonition to academics. Be careful, keep your life balanced. 13, conclusion, when all has been heard, fear God, keep his commandments. This applies to every person, for God will bring every act of judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. So, Ecclesiastes, life under the sun is going to be futile. Life under the sun, S-O-N, has purpose and meaning. So which way are you living your life? Which sun are you under? That's one way to summarize Ecclesiastes.
Made me very nervous over here.
I made you nervous?
Yeah, about what you're saying.
Was the word? Wait a minute. You got the parakeet. A little bird does wake you. John, you must be old. The little bird wakes you.
I'm getting very nervous.
You're getting very nervous?
Yeah.
Nothing nervous about. Our God is good, and we have purpose in him. And that's probably the main thing we can get out of Ecclesiastes. That last section is critical. Because if you just look at the first part, you can get very cynical if you're not careful to keep seeing these little things he's throwing out. But you have to start thinking about Solomon's life in this. He lived this out. He started so well in the beginning. These women turned his heart. Somewhere at the end, though, he started looking back and he figured out all these years it was vanity. It needs to come back to this. And so, with that many wives, I'm sure he had lots and lots of children. There was always some young son for him to give counsel to, and that's what this is too. Remember God while you're still young and make that your life goal and walk with him. Because the other part, this is not good. Okay? And if you're old, at least you're wised up before you died. Okay? Father, thank you for your blessings to us, and thank you for the truth of your word. Thank you for what Ecclesiastes tells us, even though in many ways it's a difficult book. But Father, it gives us an accurate view of cynical perspective of life when it's lived apart from you. Thank you that you've given us your word. We don't have to do that. You've given us your spirit and to indwell us for those who have faith in Christ, that we can live in a totally different way. Father, blessed by you with a purpose in life that transcends even this world into eternity. We are grateful for that. In Jesus' name, amen.